welcome to another episode of Guess That Record. I am your host, Jackson Reed. This is the show where we talk about music and try to figure out which album I pulled from my collection. Thanks to all our amazing listeners for tuning in to another episode. We have an incredible guest today. He's one of the most prolific voice actors of all time, and best known for voicing the lead characters of Fry, Professor Farnsworth, and Dr. Zoidberg on the long-running animated show Futurama. Besides that, he's appeared in films and shows like Space Jam, The Ren and Stimpy Show, Doug, and countless other productions. I'm super excited to welcome Billy West to Guess That Record. How are you doing, Billy?
Not doing bad. I was, recording some more Futurama yesterday, and I got to see a few people, and it's good to get back doing it. There's another season on the way, so.
It's really, it's so cool to be speaking with you because Futurama is one of my favorite shows, and I'm a voice actor myself, so I'm really
love that.
Really looking forward to speaking with you today.
Love that.
Yeah. Now, and the other reason I was really excited to have you on the podcast is because people may not be familiar with the fact that you are a musician yourself. And
yes,
I would love to sort of talk about that because it was really kind of your first foray into entertainment.
Yeah, it was. As soon as I was done with high school, I just I wanted to plunge myself into playing music. I was in a band. On and off before that, before I graduated from high school, but nothing official. And then finally I got one together. And we used to play dances and we used to play clubs. And, you know, uh, I didn't quite make a living. I mean, you didn't make that much money then. You made enough for Chinese food afterwards. That was about it. I think I made $16 a night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, um, we used to play cover tunes and everything. And it was, Beatles and other stuff, Bee Gees, Badfinger, stuff of the time, 1971, 70.
Mm-hmm. And you were singer and guitarist, right?
Yes, I sang, played guitar. We had a lead singer, had a rhythm guitar player, drummer, and a bass player.
Right. And so from what I've gathered, one of your earlier bands was called the Shutdowns. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that came later on. That came in the 80s.
Right.
I worked with a guy. I worked for him actually in Harvard Square. He sold used guitars and amplifiers, and I used to go down there all the time, and I wound up working there. And you just sat and played guitar all day until people came in, and it was a good place for me to be. I was also working. I had gone to work in the radio business locally. WBCN was a station in Boston, and kind of a famous station, really. And it was very, it was not strictly formatted. It was open enough for me and the production department to do a lot of fun things, sonically. We used to do, comedy and bits and everything, and it attracted people to listen to the station.
And it was funny with the Shutdowns because I did some digging and I found a video of you guys performing live. I believe it was in Hampton Beach, and
Yes.
and so with that, was that the gig you guys were opening for Roy Orbison?
No, that I think it could have been uh, the Association, or it could have been Jan and Dean, or it could have been the Four Seasons.
Yeah, yeah. And it was funny because there's one part where you're like talking with the audience, and then you started doing like a ET impression, and it was like, oh, he's the voices were in you from the beginning there.
Yeah, I think I had just started doing radio, and which was it had to be about 81 or something like that. And So I was splitting my time playing Fridays, Saturdays, and then working during the week. So it was a busy schedule, and I made enough money. I was actually making a living with that band.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I've looked into your bio and everything like that, and there's quite a few like famous musicians you've been able to run in with, and one of them that I was kind of curious about that I kept seeing pop up was Lou Reed. Um, what did you have any connection with him there?
yeah. Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller is a really close old friend of mine, and I've always been in awe of the guy. And uh, he was friends with Lou Reed, and Penn was a musician. Penn played bass and sang, and he's really good. I mean, he's a great bass player. And so we just got together, and Penn wanted to record a song because Lou wrote a song for him. Penn had this trick with Penn and Teller where they had a tattoo, but it was made of his own blood instead of ink. They took his blood out and made a tattoo out of his blood. And Lou Reed was intrigued by that and just wrote the song "Tattoo of Blood." Yeah,
It's
so we recorded that, and I met Lou once at backstage at David Letterman.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
nice. And then of course, you eventually found success in a completely different field. But what's your involvement with music like nowadays? Are you still like playing for fun or anything like that?
No, I had amassed quite a collection of guitars and amplifiers. I must have had about 21 guitars in this place. And my hands started acting up and giving me problems. And it was like suddenly it would hurt to play. And I always dreaded like when that day would come. But I mean, I made a living. I got to play. Um, I got to play with a lot of interesting people and did a lot of interesting shows. But the crowning glory of it all was a friend of mine produced Brian Wilson's first solo record on Warner Brothers, and Brian was going to do some gigs, and he needed a band. So my friend put a band together, and he asked me if I wanted to play. And I was like floored. I was like, "Oh my god!" So next thing you know, I'm out there playing on stage with Brian Wilson. I knew all his songs, and it was just a strange experience because he wrote the soundtrack to my teens, And if you'd told me when I was young that I would wind up to do that, I would have never ever believed it in a million years.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he liked me, and I enjoyed being around him. He in the early days, like when he was in his mid 20s, he was experimenting with acid, and he experimented himself out of the game, and became very non-functional, and he slowly recovered with just tons and tons of therapy and all kinds of other things, rehabilitations, and he was able to go out and play, and he was able to be cognizant and lucid enough. But there was something about him, and I'll bet you it's something. I bet you he was always like this. There was something angelic about him. He seemed amateurish as a human being as far as protocol, and he was kind of awkward, but the genius that was in him, incredible, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And you,
Yeah.
from what I saw on YouTube, there was a performance you guys did on David Letterman that you were on for. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. His daughter, Wendy, sang with us. My friend Andy Paley, who's passed away now, played bass, and Paul Schaefer's band sort of backed us up, and Brian played keyboards,
Hmm.
and I just thought that was it. It's like I could die happy. And then on top of it all, playing on the very same stage that the Beatles played on.
Hmm.
It was crazy. That was the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Yeah.
So wherever I was standing where the Beatles stood, and I watched them when I was, I don't know, 16 maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I saw a taping of the Stephen Colbert show in that theater, and I had the same thoughts. Like, wow, this is where the Beatles were in 1964. This is kind of wild. So, yeah,
I know.
cool theater.
I
Um,
know it.
yeah.
But to be playing with Brian in the, in the place where the Beatles played, I mean, that's like full circle.
Hmm. I mean, I think he would have played there with the Beach Boys at around the same time as well. So,
I think he must have, yeah.
yeah. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by Marvel Marketing. Marvel Marketing is an award winning digital marketing company headquartered in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Working with clients in different industries from all over North America, including Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Marvel Marketing services include website design and development, website maintenance, search engine optimization, public relations services, and social media management, amongst others. To find out more, visit marvelmarketing.ca. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by Guitarworks. One of Canada's top independent music stores for over 30 years, Guitarworks carries a huge selection of musical instruments from the biggest brands in music, including Gibson, Fender, Martin, Yamaha, and Paul Reed Smith. Visit any of their two Calgary locations or shop online at guitarworks.ca and join the Guitar Perks program to earn money back with every purchase. Guitarworks, your total guitar store. This episode of Guess That Record is also sponsored by Recordland, home to the largest selection of music in Canada. Buy, sell, and trade tapes, CDs, and vinyl. Located in Calgary's Inglewood neighborhood on 9th Avenue Southeast, visit them in person or on Instagram at Recordland Calgary. And then, moving into sort of your voiceover work, I think it's really interesting how your career path has gone because you didn't start out in acting. It was really radio that kind of got you into it. And like, was that sort of just how it happened? Like you were in radio and then people who make the cartoons said, "Hey, we'd love to have you on the show." Is that sort of how it worked for you?
Um, it's like you had to go out and find everything yourself. There was no signposts then. There were no teachers, there were no classes, there was no internet. Um, Radio was a very sacred place. And all those jobs, excuse me, all those jobs were coveted. It was very hard to get a job on the radio and actually get paid. I wasn't a disc jockey. I never cared about that. Um, I always thought that they were like curators in a museum. They showcase the works of others. And I didn't go for that. I wanted to create stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what I was able to do with my partner in production. Song parodies, comedy bits. We wrote commercials and voiced them, and we got to do a lot of singing. It's like what you make your own fun. You sit there and you go, "What are we gonna do?" It's like a playground. What should we do?
And then, yeah, like how does, going from that to Hollywood, like how did that work for you?
Well, in 1989, I was kind of at the top of where you could be for somebody like me in Boston. I mean, everybody knew who I was, and I loved the city, and I loved all the people, and the people in the audience were always so super nice to me, um, welcoming and warm, and what I did made them happy, and they sure let me know it. I mean, and then I decided to move to New York City, and I just our sister station WXRK was in New York City, and that was where Howard Stern was at the time. He had just arrived there about a year earlier, I think. And Mel Karmazin, the guy that ran the place, the the owner of the station, said, I'll try to see if Howard's interested in you. But I was going there for a production job. I was going to work, in a studio all day. And then I started to get a load of what they were doing on his show, and I was drawn to it. I wasn't trying to get a job, or I wasn't hucking them to be part of it. I thought it was perfect the way it was. I just thought my audition would make things worse. But I was wrong, and he asked me to be part of the show part time. So I was going back and forth at the time. I was going from New York to LA and back once a week, to do Ren and Stimpy. And then I was doing Cartoon Doug in New York. At the same time, I was doing the devil's work on the radio.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
then,
that's how that happened. And you have to audition for everything. I had agents, and they bring the opportunities to you. They say so such and such is looking for, they're casting for a show, and they're looking for this or that. And I started auditioning, and you know, it was a brave new world. It was New York, and it was huge, and there was so much competition. I mean, there'd be 200 guys auditioning for a radio spot,
mhm.
and I used to go in there, and I used to go, "Oh, what's the use?" But I stuck to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I saw in another interview you did where you kind of talked about like getting into Futurama, and like the audition process was kind of like they'd show you a character and then you had to come up with a voice on the spot. Um, walk me through what that was like. Like, did you have a feeling that Futurama was going to end up being something for you at the time?
when I found out that they were auditioning for it, and it was Matt Groening, I was certainly in awe of him. Um, and I went to that audition, and that had about 200 people sitting and waiting. And I went in, and I was going in to audition for two characters, which was Professor Hubert Farnsworth and Dr. Zoidberg. And I sort of I had a rough idea of what I was going to do, and I went with my guts. I looked at the pictures, and the first thing I thought of is what I went with, because you can think yourself out of a job. You start doing editing, and you start doing all this post production in your head and saying, "Oh, that won't work. That'll fail," and you psych yourself out of a great idea that you might have had, from your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did what I thought those characters looked like to me, or what they would have sounded like, and Matt was intrigued by that. And then at the last minute, they pulled out a picture of this one Philip J. Fry, and they said, "Just curious, you think you want to give this a try?" And I was stuck. I didn't know. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared to audition for that, so I had to pull something out of my ass. And what I did was I tried to sound like I did when I was 25, because Fry was 25 years old. But I was all whiny and nasally and complainy, and I was in a band, and man, shit, I broke a string. What am I gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how that came about.
For sure, for sure. And it's, you voice so many characters on the show, and it's like it's cool how sometimes it'll be a scene and it's just you doing all the characters. Like one of my favorite scenes in the whole show, I think, is it's the second episode ever, and it's
Yeah.
where the professor brings Fry to get a physical from Zoidberg. And
Yes.
Zoidberg is like, "Open your mouth and let's have a look at that brain."
Yes.
And
Yes. He was
that's
some doctor, huh?
yeah. And
Young lady, I'm a doctor. I know what I'm doing.
yeah. And like, yeah, how when you have those scenes where it's just you doing multiple characters, like do you do it all at once or sort of break it up?
You do it in real time, because it would take forever
Mhm.
if you had to go through the script as one character and then start all over again and do the second character. They would have a lot of editing to do. So I would read it in real time as the characters appeared. And I was adept to that, because I don't know how to do anything else, quite frankly. I really don't. I I had difficulty learning to do anything, including tying my shoes, including buckling a seat belt. Because I was on the spectrum, and I was like that as a kid, except there was no word for that in the 1950s.
Right.
There was no word for autism, and even though they're trying to say that Tylenol causes it, there was no Tylenol when I was born.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. And like with another thing I was kind of curious about when it comes to sort of performing these characters is that like you have to and there's a lot of scenes, especially with Fry, where he's like screaming at the top of his lungs and it's very high pitched and
Yes.
like how do you get through those sorts of scenes without like blowing out your voice?
I have. I have done that. As I got older, it would happen. The recovery would take a little longer. But I got my basic training. My boot camp was like Ren and Stimpy as far as screaming and physicality, and it's very odd, when you're acting out a scene where you're embattled or you're angry or whatever. Your body really thinks that you're going through these things, and it feels like it afterwards. Like you just fought a war. And you gotta like get your bearings again and stuff. But that's because I put 1,000% into it. But any actor, you know, that's worth their salt does that. That's like prerequisite.
Mm-hmm.
And it's love of craft. It's respect of the art. You want to give it so much that you're like willing to wreck yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, I think the other cool thing about Futurama is just the fact that, like, it's been canceled and revived and canceled and revived. Like, it just seems to have such staying power. And I think it's
Yes.
cool, like, especially with the newer seasons. Like it still feels like Futurama. Like it hasn't really lost its charm at all. What do you think has made the show be so successful or across all of these years?
Um, it's the writers. It's Matt Groening's overview, his oversight, his vision. Um, I think he pretty much got what he imagined. And maybe then some, because he was always so pleased with everything, that how it was coming out. And the writers are my heroes. These writers are incredible. From Dave Cohen down. Um, they have Some of them have been around since the very beginning, and we've welcomed others over the years. But it's just they had a way of writing comedy that was refreshing. It was different, and they weren't afraid to take chances. Um, they never pandered. I don't think, almost never, to the audience, and they gave the audience a lot of credit for being able to follow stuff.
Hmm.
Even the scientific stuff. There's
Yeah.
people that will write or call and question how come this happened and that. And there are people that think scientifically out there, and it's real math and science as far as I can discern. They have scholars, math scholars, physics, people come in and brief them on, the writers will say, we got this situation where we want to do this. Is it scientifically possible? Is it theoretically possible? And the person will say, well, yeah, it is actually. And that's all they need to know. And they will craft a scene or an act or a whole show around those premises.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, just out of curiosity, because, you mentioned at the show or at the start of the interview that you were just recording. I know a lot of progress has been made in terms of like home studios for voiceover actors.
Yes.
But do you still like go into a proper studio to make this show, or are you doing it from home?
Um, no, I keep going to the studio, but during the pandemic, which changed everything, one of the reasons why we're on Zoom. I mean,
Hmm.
Zoom just exploded during the pandemic because nobody could go anywhere, and so we didn't go to the studio. So I was working out of the house, and it was real makeshift. It was like attaching uh, wires to a mic, and like you had to find something to block the sound, and I was using blankets over my head, and it was crazy.
All right, Billy. Well, we are now going to be entering into the guessing segment of this podcast. So I'm going to explain the rules to you and any new listeners we may have. So in this bag here is a record from my collection. I'm going to give you 3 clues about this album, and then we play a game of 20 questions to try and figure out what it is. So,
Okay.
Billy West, are you ready to guess that record?
Yes, I am.
All right, here are your 3 clues. This album was recorded in the 1960s. It was unreleased until the 2010s, and it features one of this band's biggest hits. Question 1.
I don't, excuse me, I didn't really follow music at that time.
Well, this is, I'll give you another hint because this is an artist that we've already spoken about is related
Oh,
to this. And this album, yeah, it was recorded and then it sat unreleased for decades until it finally,
okay.
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
He was 40 years ahead of his time. That was Brian Wilson recording of Smile.
And you got it. It
There it
is
is.
Smile.
There it
Now,
is.
what can you tell the listeners about this record?
Well, the original version that came out was a totally different edited version that the studio released. It wasn't what Brian wanted out there, so he had to re-record a bunch of stuff. And the album was called Smiley Smile.
Mm-hmm.
And Smile, yes, like you said, it just, you know, sat. And then finally, Brian got around to listening to the old tapes again, and and he had already started his comeback. He had written a couple albums worth of stuff, and like I said, my friend produced it, and these session tapes were just so precious, and they were getting restored, and um, it was just wonderful that the Pet Sounds was getting restored, and a whole new generation got to hear this stuff. And I loved it when I used to read the comments on YouTube. There's all these young people that going, "Man, did we get gypped? How come there? What happened to this kind of what? Where did it all go?" And because they had nothing to A B the modern junk.
Yeah.
I guess everybody my age thinks everything is junk, but yeah, that was monumental, and he was the first to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the tracks is an early example of what heavy metal would become, and it was the Fire Suite. He had a thing called Mrs. O'Leary's Cow, and it gets so thunderous and frightening, and it sounds like a building going up in flames. And yeah, it's inspirational and it's very moving to this day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because I of course heard Pet Sounds before I heard this, but I sort of stumbled across these recordings, and it was like I honestly I find it a bit more interesting to listen to than Pet Sounds, just because like you've got stuff like Heroes and Villains and Cabin Essence and Surfs
Yeah,
Up and like just so complex for the time, and it's really, and I think also the fact that they just sat gathering dust for so long also
yep,
makes it really interesting. And the other cool thing, because I this came from the, like, it's like a big box set, and
yes,
they in that box set they have all the sessions like on CDs. So you can
Ah,
listen to, like, Brian in the control room being like, okay,
yes.
we need to try playing it this way. All right, let's go again here. And it's
I know he was quite the director and quite the maestro, you know.
mhm. And of course, the other, probably the ultimate example of the complexity of this record would have to be Good Vibrations,
Yes,
which I read that at the time it was recorded, it was the most expensive single ever made or something like that. And you can
it
definitely,
was.
yeah.
It was literally miles and miles and miles of recording tape
Hmm.
when they were using recording tape. The
And
brown stuff, in case anybody wondered, that was on a reel to reel. Um, yeah, it was real tape, and it would pick up sound, and it was developed in the 30s,
yeah,
and then really came into action in the 40s. Um, I think that song was put together in pieces. It was edited together like a suite. That was the idea. It would have movements, which was unheard of because Top 40 radio was not friendly to those experiments.
hmm,
They wanted 3 minutes and 59 or 40, 3 minutes and 39 seconds of pure boom, 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 straight ahead, straight forward. Um, no cosmic excursions, in the middle. And he was experimental. He had done it all. He had written so many damn hits. But you got to remember, he was doing this experimenting around the late part of 65, 66. And I was still singing Dance, Dance, Dance and Surfing USA while that stuff was being recorded. I was behind. I was lagging behind.
yeah. Do you have any memories? Because of course, Good Vibrations wasn't unreleased. Do you have any like early memories of hearing that song when it came out, or
Yeah,
when you
when
were
it came out,
younger?
it was a single.
Hmm.
And I forget what the B side was, but I remember me and my friend were at some girl's house after school, and they had the record player set up, and they had that single, and it popped on, and I went, "Oh my God, what is this? What is this sound?" It was just so it was refreshing, and it built up and piqued your interest, and then it became electrifying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I guess to kind of wrap it up here, like when you got to work with Brian,
Yes.
um, what is sort of like the most memorable, like if he had a memorable story that he told you, what's something that you remember from that time specifically about Brian?
I remember having dinner with him um, at a friend's house. David Leaf, um, a wonderful writer, had chronicled a lot of the Beach Boys stuff. Like he knew them, he had interviewed them several times, and he had written several books about them. And we were at his house, and his wife made a big Italian dinner, and Brian and his wife were there, and they had a rough day. They had just been at the hospital visiting her sister, and they were down. And I, um, I felt like this guy has given me so much joy. So when we sat down at dinner, I just wanted to be engaging. I wanted to try and lift up the spirits in the room, which is what I always try to do anyway. I'm always like clowning or looking for a bit. And I said, Brian, did you ever meet Frank Sinatra? And he said, Yeah, I met him. I remember over at Capitol. And I wrote a song for him, and I told him, he said, Mr. Sinatra, I wrote a song for you. And he did this impression of Frank Sinatra. Keep it. You know, he told him to keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that there was someone in history that told Brian Wilson to keep his song.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, look, we got the song thing covered, okay?
yeah. Yeah. I think I just had a thought because one of my favorite videos that I've seen of Brian Wilson, it was from a documentary that George Martin put together. George Martin,
Yeah,
the Beatles producer, where he goes and visits Brian, and they're in the studio and they're dissecting God Only Knows. And
yes,
it's so cool how George was like messing with the sliders, and then Brian goes, that's a better mix than the one that I did. And
Yeah, he meant it. He
yeah.
meant it. He was in awe of George Martin. His heroes were, I think his early heroes were Phil Spector.
Hmm.
Absolutely, I knew that. His early hero was Phil Spector. And then I'm sure he became enamored and in awe of George Martin's work because he was listening to the production and he was a one-man army actually against the Beatles. They were neck and neck in the charts for years.
Hmm.
The Beatles would come out with something and Brian goes, all right, we got to do this. We got to do this. And it was like back and forth. And then they'd hear what he did and they would try to top that. It was a really cool time.
For sure. And
Yeah.
like this was the Smile record, of course, was kind of like it was a race between this and Sergeant Pepper, which one would come out first.
Yes.
But yeah, of course, Sergeant Pepper won that race. But
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. But he loved the Beatles. He did. He had a collaboration at one time with Paul McCartney.
Hmm.
And Mike Love inspired a passage in Back in the USSR. Um, there's a part in Back in the USSR that sounds like the Beach Boys.
Yes. The
The
Ukraine
Moscow
girls.
make me sing and shout.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that was a direct tip of the hat to the Beach Boys. And Mike Love, I think, had laid that on McCartney. Hey, why don't you try this?
That, it's funny you point that out because I don't think I've ever noticed that in all my years listening to that song. So that's
Same kind of harmonies, everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Billy. Well, we have reached the end of the interview. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
So cool to speak with you. Besides the new season of Futurama, do you have any other work coming out soon?
Yes, there's we're still, doing the Futurama and I'm still, good news, everyone. And your music is bad and you should feel bad. Kif, go take a nap. Improve the quality of life around here, won't you, eh? And and Fry, of course, which I was doing earlier. But yeah, I'm doing a cartoon for Disney called Big City Greens, and it's really popular. Kids really like it, and it's kind of charming, and I enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing commercials, of course, for M&Ms, which I've been doing for 33 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Guess That Record. Make sure to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen and tell your friends to check us out. I want to shout out our radio partners currently airing Guess That Record as a syndicated show. CKMS in Kitchener, Ontario, CKXU in Lethbridge, Alberta, and South Devon Sound in Kingsbridge, UK. So if you're in those markets, be sure to check those stations out to hear the show. If you're with a radio station and you'd be interested in adding Guess That Record to your programming, send us an email to guessthatrecordpodcast@gmail.com. We'd also appreciate it if you follow us on Instagram and TikTok, where our username on both platforms is @GuessThatRecord. And lastly, subscribe to our YouTube channel to see the video versions of these amazing interviews. Remember to keep rocking, and we'll see you on the next episode of Guess That Record.